Hey, hey, hey! I hope that you enjoy this lecture from the comfort of your home. As you go through this, take additional notes on your PowerPoint printouts, and that way you can email me if you have any questions before your exam, because I want you to be really prepared, and if you have any questions, just email me. Okay, so right off the bat, at first, instead of going all the way through the PowerPoint, I'm going to point out the big items that I want you to know. And then, after that, I'll go all the way through the PowerPoint. So, if you'll start with me, we're going to look at the short answers first. And remember, the short answers may or may not be on the exam, but they're just for practice and to kind of get you comfortable with what you're going to be writing about. But that's always going to be the big ideas of the chapter. So this chapter is all about water and electrolyte balances. And so how does because we just finished the renal system, how does the renal system, or the kidneys, how do those nephrons, how do they control the water, the electrolytes? Remember, it's just ions. And then the most important part of this lecture is the acid-base balance. So how does it regulate the pH? Okay, if you will, skip with me to slide 13. And we'll look at this question first. Describe the main components of extracellular and intracellular fluids. Okay, first, extracellular is going to be outside the cell membrane. So it's not in the cell, like where the nucleus and the Golgi and all that are. So anything outside of the cell, we consider outside cellular fluid. Okay, intracellular fluid is anything inside the cell, right? So inside there with the cell membrane. Okay, so the extracellular fluid, and I'll go there first. We already said it's outside. It's going to have increased, so more, sodium, which is probably the most important. 90% of the sodium is right there. It's going to have calcium. It's going to have chloride. And that bicarbonate. And really, if you think about it, of all the water in your body, 1/3 of the water is extracellular. And the most important of the extracellulars is this sodium. That's not too good, huh? Okay, let's go with intracellular now. Let's see if I can fit it down here. Intracellular is going to have increased amounts of, most important one, potassium. Right, and I don't care if on your short answer you use the letters or the words, whichever makes more sense to you. So, potassium, it's got magnesium, it's got that phosphate group, it's got sulfate, and this one has, of all the water in your body, this actually has 75% of the water. So that's, body water. So that's, it's got way more water in the intracellular. And what makes molecules move from intracellular to extracellular is going to be osmotic pressure. That's what causes the movement here. And so when you go back and look, you want to know for sure that sodium is extracellular with calcium, chloride, and bicarbonate. And then potassium is intracellular with magnesium, phosphate, sulfate, and way more water. Okay, the next short answer is on slide. Well, hang on, before we move on any further, go back and look at this slide. Let's see if I can. Yeah, so if you go back and look at this slide, this diagram right here shows you, okay, so the purple is extracellular. So it's got high sodium, look, high chlorine, or chloride. And then the intracellular, look at the turquoise color, high potassium, high magnesium, high phosphate group. And so this will maybe this visual will kind of help you remember those as you study for that short answer. Okay, next question, if you'll turn with me to slide 20. Okay, flashback with me. Remember from the kidney section, we talked about, and this will just be a quick review, not really anything to do with the question, but I want to remind you, you've got the glomerulus, right? And then, so there was that. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So from the glomerulus, it went down and then up. Okay, so remember that all the ions, and we drew this out in class, but all the ions were pulled out right here and pulled into the glomerulus. So, water and lots of the electrolytes were pulled out, and they were taken out of the bloodstream and put into the renal tubule. Okay, well, right here in the renal tubule, we're going to take and put some of those ions back into the blood. Right there, remember that's called the proximal, right here, is the proximal convoluted tubule. Mine's not very convoluted, but anyway. And then right before it goes to exit the kidney, you're going to say, oh, well, maybe just a little more. We're going to put a few of those molecules back into the kidney tubule, and that will go out and be excreted as urine. And so if it goes in the blood, it's going back to the body. And if it's inside the tubule, it's going to leave and be excreted as urine. And if you'll remember, this is reabsorption. Reabsorbing it back into the blood. And then the other side is secretion. So we're going to decide at the very last minute to excrete it as urine. So secretion that's what's going to be excreted as urine. Okay, so now to get to the question. Easy breezy. The sodium your body conserves. So the renal tubules increase right here, increase the reabsorption of sodium, but they're going to excrete the potassium. So in other words, to answer this question, think about right here. The purple is potassium. The purple is going back in. It's going to be secreted. And the sodium, we'll make it, how about this turquoise color, is going to be conserved. It's going back to the blood. So sodium is reabsorbed or conserved. I spelled conserved wrong. That should be a D. Anyway. And the potassium is excreted or secreted. Okay. And you can see that right here on slide 19. So that's where I got, if you'll look at the this two bottom boxes, you can see that there. Okay, go with me to slide 23. Okay, very similar, except instead of sodium and potassium, we're working with calcium and phosphate. Okay, so the renal tubules, all you have to write, because I know you know, I already drew it out for you, the renal tubules are going to conserve the calcium. Hey, calcium is good for your bones, right? You got to have it for muscle flexion. All of that, let's make that, and that plus sign should be a little superscript up there. Okay, so that is conserved. And the phosphate group, and that's a little 4 and a superscript -3, would be excreted. And I do want to mention calcium is regulated by what gland? Think back to the very first test. The calcium is regulated by the parathyroid gland. So, and now you can kind of see the kidneys have this really important job of regulating sodium and potassium, calcium and phosphate, and so they're making sure that you have that perfect amount, that homeostasis. Just enough, not too much, homeostasis. Okay, flip with me to slide 30. Okay, so important in your healthcare profession. But before I really answer this question, let me do a little bit of teaching. Okay, so surely sometime in your life you've seen the pH scale, right? From 0 to 14. You know that over here this is acid or acidic, and this is a base. Okay, and then right in the middle would be neutral, which is 7. Okay, and so just a little by the way, remember, acids have an excess amount of hydrogen ions. So hydrosulfuric acid, carbonic acid, all the acids you can think of, they have hydrogens. All the bases, they have hydroxides. And so, you can't see that. Okay, so they have OH negative or hydroxide. So acids release a hydrogen while bases release that hydroxide. Okay, so human blood is right in between. So I'm going to make a little, this is normal human blood, and it's going to be somewhere in the range of 7.35 to 7.45. So not a very big range, right? Human blood is right in the middle, right there, and it needs to stay that way. And the way that it is maintained, one of three ways, is this bicarbonate buffer system. And so I'm about to describe it. This is just a little pre-teaching. And so in order to maintain that 7.35 to that 7.45, you've got to have the bicarbonate, the phosphate, and the protein buffer system. All three of those systems, which is the next short answer, all three of those systems regulate the acid-base balance or the acidity in the blood. Okay, if someone were to get to 6.8, this is another short answer, so I won't even write it, or to 8, that is so, just 8. That's like 0.15 over normal. They could, if they were to stay that way for a few hours, they could even die. And so this is very important. And I think, who's going to find this? The nurses. You are, assuming that's your major. It's going to be you, not the patient, not the doctor that makes one round, but it's going to be the nurse that's in and out all day that's going to realize the pH is off. And so, you could save lives that way. One of the many ways that nurses save lives is by recognizing this. And so that's why I wanted to stress that and make it, very clear. Okay, so how does the bicarbonate system do it? Now we're answering the question. So discuss the bicarbonate buffer system in detail. Okay, here we go. So this formula, if you want to write this down, this hydrogen all by itself plus a bicarbonate yields carbonic acid. Okay, so you got your hydrogen. I started over so I could make room. You got your first hydrogen ion right here, plus the bicarbonate ion yields carbonic acid. Okay, so you take the hydrogen and put it on that, and this is what you get. You get carbonic acid. So, and remember, you can write the words or the symbols, whichever one is easiest for you to remember. Okay, and then to break it down, you just break it down the exact same way. You take the hydrogen off, put it right there, and what you're left with is the bicarbonate right there. So this is bicarbonate, this is carbonic acid. So let me sum this up. The hydrogen and bicarbonate ion put together make carbonic acid. You take the carbonic acid, break it down, you get hydrogen and bicarbonate. Okay, so when you look at how does this work, how does the bicarbonate buffer work? Well, the bicarbonate ion, this one, converts a strong acid to a weak acid. So it converts a strong acid right here to a weak acid. And then the carbonic acid carbonic acid right here, converts a strong base to a weak base. And I got those words off of slide 25. So if you want to flip back, whoops. Slide 29, excuse me. So the bicarbonate ion converts a strong acid to a weak acid, and the carbonic acid, this one, converts a strong base to a weak base. So all it is this is important because it's maintaining that pH in the blood. Okay, next question, if you'll go on down, it's asking you, we did that one. Okay, right here. List 3 ways to regulate hydrogen concentration. Well, one way we just talked about for a long time, was the bicarbonate system, right? And so the first one is bicarbonate system. And all you have to know about the bicarbonate system for this question, now you have to know everything else for the other one. Oh, you just have to list them. Okay, bicarbonate system is the first one, but that uses the carbon and the hydrogens. That's all it uses. It goes back and forth between bicarbonate and carbonic acid. Okay, the second one is the phosphate system. And it uses phosphates, right? So it's going to go back and forth with hydrogen. Hydrogen is the key with acid, right? The H's and hydroxides. So phosphate and hydrogens. And then the third one, which is going to use the nitrogens, is going to be the protein system. So those are your 3: protein, phosphate, and bicarbonate system. Okay, flip with me to slide 38. Okay, we already went over this when I very first started, but I want to go over it again because, like I said, the most important thing in this whole chapter, I think, is regulating the pH. And so make sure you can draw a pH scale. And you know that 0 to 7 is an acid, and 7 to 14 is a base, and then, of course, 7 is neutral. Right? If someone, we already said that normal pH, normal blood pH, is going to be between 7.35 and 7.45. So not a very big range, right? Not a very big range at all. Normal, you got to be perfect. Okay, and then we said if it gets to 6.8, that would be severe, 6.8 now, not very far, severe acidosis. And then 8.0 would be severe alkalosis. And this one is acidosis. And if you want to draw this, if you want to draw this on this question instead of writing it, that would be fine. So it says describe the pH scale. We described it: acid, base, neutral. Denote neutral, 7. Acid base, 0 to 7 or 7 to 14. What is normal blood pH? We listed that. And then what values represent extreme difficulty leading to even death? 6.8 and 8.0. And so you'll see this on the slide right before it. Nope, right there. So there it is, nice. I know my picture was better than that, I know. But there's another picture. All right, great. And then the last short answer is on slide 43, so flip with me there. Okay, oh, that's not it. Okay, it is, sorry. Using the pH scale, diagram acid, alkali, because, okay, you do not have to do that twice on the test. We will not be doing that. Okay, list the 4 types of clinical problems giving symptoms. Okay, and so this is in the video again later. What I did was I made the video, and then I went back, and now I'm making this one to put in front of it with just the short answers. And so you'll hear some of things twice, but that's okay. Those things are on the test twice. So this is really focusing on the short answer part of the test, this first 20 minutes, and then the last 30 minutes is focusing more on the multiple choice part of the test. Okay, so you have respiratory, acidosis, respiratory, alkalosis. Okay, metabolic acidosis. And then metabolic alkalosis. Okay, so respiratory, let's think that first. Respiratory, think about breathing, right? CO2. Okay, CO2 is acidic. Okay, so you're thinking about breathing, respiratory acidosis. That means you're not breathing very well. You're not getting the CO2 out of the body. And I said CO2 is acidic, so not breathing well. You're going to have increased CO2. You're going to have increased acid, right? Carbonic acid. Okay, so a little side note, the symptoms are not breathing well. Not breathing. My box is too little. There we go. Not breathing well. Okay. Respiratory alkalosis, that's going to be hyperventilation, right? So you're getting the CO2 out, but you're not getting the oxygen in good. So hyperventilating, and a lot of times you'll associate hyperventilation with brown bag breathing, right? So you'll breathe on the brown bag. Okay, on respiratory alkalosis, you're going to have an excessive loss of CO2, right? So we already said hyperventilation. Symptoms will include, and you write this down, I can't because I don't have room, but symptoms include lightheadedness, agitated, dizzy. I'd be agitated if I couldn't breathe too. Or if I wasn't getting oxygen, right? And so you're breathing too much, hyperventilation. Okay, let's go metabolism now. Metabolic, you want to think digestion, right? So we're down here on the metabolic. You're thinking digestion. The kidneys start to fail on metabolic acidosis. You got diarrhea and vomiting with metabolic acidosis. And kidney fail here. Okay, with metabolic alkalosis, think about diuretic. So vomiting and decrease in gastric acid. So decrease in gastric acid. Okay, so now I'm about to go back to the very beginning of the PowerPoint and just point out some things that you want to be aware of, and we'll go all the way through this. And please remember, if you have any questions, all you have to do is email me. You've got my email address, but just in case. And so that way I can help you on your test. EDU. Perfect. Okay, so start with the first slide, chapter 21. It's really all about balance, homeostasis. What are we balancing? Water, electrolytes or ions, right? Sodium, potassium, things like that. And then the pH, acid bases. Okay, so homeostasis is just how your body maintains a balance in temperature, in pH, in sugar levels in your blood. But for this PowerPoint, what it's talking about is how we maintain a balance of water and our electrolytes, and our pH too. And so homeostasis is the tendency to maintain, word you want to know is stable. Stable is homeostasis. So intake and outtake of electrolytes and water. I do want to throw in right here that we didn't include in the last PowerPoint. The muscle that helps you contract to let you know that you have to urinate. The rhythmic contractions, those muscles are DE, whoops. Detressors. So those are the muscles that actually control the water leaving the bladder. And so I didn't see that in the chapter 20 PowerPoint. So I did want to throw that in right there. Okay. Electrolytes. Substances that release ions, acids, electrolytes that disassociate or they the charges come off. So you can see right there the positive hydrogen and the negative chlorine. Okay, so you want to know on bases, anything with a base or anything that is a base is going to have this OH right there. And OH, that we pronounce that instead of saying OH, that's called a hydroxide. That's a functional group that you probably remember from some chemistry class along the way. So that's a hydroxide, but you want to know that anything with a base is going to be releasing hydroxides. Anything that's an acid is going to be releasing hydrogens. So acids, hydrogens, bases, hydroxides. Okay, anaerobic respiration is where your body makes energy without oxygen. Okay, so that's going to help you, and you're going to actually release hydrogen protons in the process. So anytime we're really breaking things down without oxygen, anaerobic respiration is going to cause an increase of hydrogen. And so does when we break down sulfur, when we break down amino acids. So anytime we break down sulfur, amino acids, and you know amino acids is protein, it's going to lead to an increase of hydrogen protons. So you want to write that down somewhere. Okay, so your pH scale, and you probably remember this from some time in your life, goes from 0 to 14. 0 to 7 being acidic, 7 to 14 being base. And we just said from the last slide, anything with a base is going to release hydroxide ions. And anything that's an acid is going to release hydrogen ions. And you know the word ion just means a charged particle. So concentration of hydrogens in the solution, that's what pH actually is. The concentration of the amount of hydrogens. 7 is neutral. Anything, we said acidic, 7 to 0. And then alkaline, so the word alkaline means basic. Alkaline is 7 or greater. Okay, so pH of blood, you want to know is about 7.4. So 7.35 to 7.45. And then you want to know alkalosis and acidosis. So you want to know all this. Alkalosis when it's too basic, and acidosis when it's too acidic. Buffers are what maintain your pH. And so you remember from the blood PowerPoint that the hemoglobin holds the iron, and that takes in the oxygen and releases the CO2. Well, the bicarbonate buffer in your blood is what maintains that. But I want you to know those numbers, alkalosis and acidosis, simply because that's important in your career. If someone's pH were to get as low as 6.8, so really just one number off, it could be fatal. So those numbers are important, but our body maintains that. So this slide's just showing you that your blood does move around the inorganic salts. All right, so looking at slide 9, you want to know intracellular. That's just going to be the amount of water inside the cell. And then extracellular, like in the tissue, is going to be outside. So intra, inside, extra, E-X-T-R-A, is outside. And 2/3 of the body fluid is inside. So that You want to take note of that. 2/3 of body fluid is actually inside the cell. The other 1/3 is outside the cell. And you can see here that males have more, and they need to maintain more water than females do. But it seems like women drink more water than men. Okay, so moving on, and those words are actually defined right there. So it's inside the cell or in the interstitial fluid with extracellular. Okay, so looking at this one, with extracellular fluids, that's what EC stands for. Extracellular fluids here, we're talking about sodium, calcium, and chloride. So there they are, sodium, calcium, and chloride. So make sure that on the test I may use the words in several questions, and then the symbols are used in other questions. So make sure that you know both sodium, calcium, chloride, and bicarbonate, which is HCO3 with a negative charge. So bicarbonate, you want to know that one, HCO3. In fact, that's actually another question besides the one about extracellular fluid. It's just, what is the symbol or the molecular formula for bicarbonate? So make sure you got that written down. That right there is bicarbonate. You got to get the 3 and the negative sign on that one. But really, from looking at this slide, I'm going to go to a separate page here. Looking at this slide, you can see that extracellular and intracellular, which we know the difference in now. For extracellular, you're going to have sodium, calcium, chlorine, and the bicarbonate. Where the intracellular, you're going to have potassium, magnesium, let's write it correctly. We're going to write it, I guess. You got your phosphate group and your sulfate ions. Okay, so this is just the difference in the elements in the extracellular and intracellular. So that's the main components of the fluid. Okay, so water balance, just you want to know, and we actually have already said this, but what helps you maintain your water balance? ADH, if you remember that from the endocrine system, that comes from the pituitary gland and has your kidneys store urine, and it's also in this PowerPoint. And then also aldosterone. Those are just some regulators of urine. But the greatest electrolyte output source is your kidneys. And so greatest, I want to write this in. And you can tell from the picture there, just the fluids, electrolyte intake, electrolyte output, and then it's just being excreted. So that's what that picture is showing you, that the electrolytes gained and electrolytes lost. Okay, so this slide says the concentration of positively charged ions, such as sodium and potassium and calcium, are of particular importance. And so, aldosterone just regulates that. Because of aldosterone, we can conserve the sodium and excrete potassium. So sodium and potassium are always, if one's excreted, the other one is conserved. And then sodium ions account for nearly 90% of the ions in your body, of the charged particles. And so most of what you have in your body is sodium. And then the concentration of positively charged ions, such as sodium, potassium, and calcium, are important. Okay, so here's a picture that shows your electrolyte output. It's a diagram here. But if your body needs sodium, it's going to excrete potassium to maintain. It's all about the charge. You want to keep your cells at a certain charge, especially neurons. They have to have that negative 70 charge. You probably remember from 201. But the potassium ion and the sodium ion are going to be switching up. They flip-flop. So potassium ion concentration increases. And then you can see, then you secrete aldosterone, and then sodium increases, and then secretion of potassium ion. So just know that they're flip-flopped. Okay, so calcium has lots of functions, and you want to jot these down. The 4 functions of calcium are muscle contraction, so muscle contraction, nervous system. If you remember from 201, it helps the signal jump the synapse. Bone development, we all knew that one. That's why you got to drink milk when you're young. And the last one, it helps with blood clotting. Okay, so muscle contraction, these are functions of calcium. Helps your muscles contract. The calcium actually binds to the muscle cell, opens up the channel for depolarization. Helps with the nervous system so that the nerve impulse can jump. Calcium helps with bone development. And then it helps with blood clotting. So those are 4 functions of calcium you want to know. Okay, so looking at this slide, hypercalcemia, which I did in the last PowerPoint, is just going to be high concentration of calcium. But it says increased parathyroid hormone secretions. So you want to know that it's the parathyroid hormone is what regulates calcium. So parathyroid hormone regulates your calcium. Also, your vitamin D is going to regulate calcium absorption. But I'm sure you remember from the endocrine system lecture, calcitonin from the thyroid regulates calcium. That actually decreases it. And parathyroid is going to increase it. So parathyroid increases the amount of calcium absorbed. Okay, so sources of hydrogen ions. And we already said at the very beginning of this PowerPoint, remember that acids are going to be your hydrogen ions. So this is going to maintain the pH. So the hydrogen ions actually do a lot. The 5 sources of hydrogens are going to be glucose metabolism with aerobic and anaerobic. But you can see from the picture, this right here, this lactic acid, that's going to be your anaerobic. Breaking down sulfur, breaking down amino acids. Okay, so jot this down. 5 sources of hydrogens are going to be glucose metabolism, and there, it tells you there's anaerobics. Okay, with carbonic acid, which was the first one, this first green one right here. Glucose metabolism with lactic acid. So both of those are going to be your anaerobic. Okay, the third one you're going to write down is amino acids. And that's just going to be breaking down, that's the purple one right there, breaking down proteins into the sulfuric acid. Next one, fatty acids. So as you break down fats, and then the last one is nucleic acids, as you break down DNA. Okay, so remember, an easy way that's going to help you remember those 5 things: glucose with carbonic, glucose with lactic, amino acid, fatty acid, and nucleic acid. easy way to remember that is going to be to remember those 4 macromolecules. Protein, carbs, nucleic acid. So that's going to be your DNA and RNA. So nucleic acid was DNA and RNA, and then the 4th one was fatty acids. So we've actually talked about this before, but that'll help you to remember the sources of hydrogen. So you've got the carbohydrates, which is the sugars, the amino acids, which is your proteins, and then nucleic acid, which is your DNA, and fatty acids, of course, which is fatty acids. So that'll help you just know that all of those things increase the hydrogen concentration in the blood. Okay, so we're on slide 22 now. Okay, so strong acids, let's go ahead and get it all out there. Strong acids release lots of hydrogen. Weak acids, less hydrogen. Bases are going to be hydroxides. Okay, so you got this. Acids release hydrogen, protons. Bases release hydroxides. Okay, so strong acids release more. Strong bases release more. But that'll help you. And the way that we regulate the acid-base concentration is just going to be with buffers. But the breathing, or getting the CO2 out of the body, that's going to help regulate it. And then we're going to get some of the charge of the pH, of the acidity, out in our renal excretion. So the buffers, the respiratory system, and the renal excretions all maintain that for us. Okay, so this slide is just showing you acids. You got a base buffer system, acid-base buffer system. So that's going to be your buffer. Excretory system with respiration. So excretion of breathing. And then your renal. So those were the 3 we just listed. But you do want to make note that a buffer is a substance that minimizes change in pH. And that's just going to be in that red blood cell. So we talked about that when we talked about blood. Okay, so looking here, this is just showing you the types of buffers. You have the bicarbonate, the phosphate, and the protein buffer system. So there's your 3 types of buffers. Okay, so this slide's important. So we're on slide 25. Bicarbonate system, so that's just your buffer system, the first one. Okay, so what it does is it takes the hydrogen proton plus the bicarbonate right there, and that's going to make carbonic acid, and then the carbonic acid is going to make a hydrogen proton plus the bicarbonate ion. So what I would probably do if I were you is write in what those symbols are. Be familiar with both. So you got hydrogen proton, I'm not going to write that one, and this is a bicarbonate ion. That's the bicarbonate ion there. Makes H2CO3 is carbonic acid. And then that's your bicarbonate again. But you want to know that. So the hydrogen proton with a bicarbonate makes carbonic acid, which then disassociates, or the word disassociates just means breaks down hydrogen and the bicarbonate again. So really, it's easy if you think about it. the hydrogen and the bicarbonate make carbonic acid. And then carbonic acid could turn around and make hydrogen plus the bicarbonate. So the bicarbonate ion actually converts a strong acid into the weak acid. Carbonic acid then converts a strong base to a weak base. So it's just the conversion system trying to get the pH of your blood right at that 7.4. Okay, the phosphate system, you can see written below. And this is just, it says the monohydrogen phosphate ion converts the strong acid to a weak acid. And then the dihydrogen phosphate, right there underlined, converts a strong base to a weak base. But that's just the way that the buffers work. So they take and switch the ions around so that you can regulate your pH. Okay, and then the third one is the protein buffer system. And that's all, protein's going to have nitrogen in it. And so because that amine group, the NH3 group releases the hydrogen ion in the presence of excess bases. So the amine group right here plus the hydrogen makes NH3. And then the carboxyl group right here, COOH, accepts a hydrogen in the presence of excess. So bicarbonate, phosphate, and protein buffer system are all helping you regulate pH. All right, and this is all coming from the brainstem. So you can see right there, with a highlighter, whoops. Okay, there we go. But the brainstem increases the production of CO2. So the brainstem increases production of CO2. Okay, and then also CO2 stimulates the brainstem. So it's homeostasis. It works hand in hand. So increased CO2 is going to stimulate the brainstem. And so the brainstem helps to regulate that. And you can tell from the picture right here, it says CO2 reacts with water to produce that carbonic acid again. When CO2 reacts with water, it produces carbonic acid. So increased hydrogen means that it needs to get rid of the free radicals. So you just release CO2. You breathe out CO2. Okay, so slide 30, looking at that one. Acid-base balances, you've got the pH scale again, but this is showing you just the normal human range. So 6.8 to 8.0 is survival range. And then normal pH, 7.35 to 7.45. And we've seen that already. But this is really a nurse's job, and that's to help make sure this is okay. So this is something that you may catch that a physician might not catch. And so I know you know this, but everyone doesn't, that nurses really have an important role in making sure that the patient's okay. And so looking at the pH scale, just be familiar with these numbers. So normal range of blood is 7.35 to 7.45, and then just survival 6.8 to 8.0. And just want to point out, alkalosis might be a little bit harder to remember, but that means basic, and then acidosis means acidic. So I'm going to draw a little extra on this one. Okay, so respiratory acidosis, and this will actually finish us out. This is on the next slides, but respiratory acidosis, and then respiratory and then down here we've got metabolic acidosis and metabolic alkalosis. Okay, so those are the headings in the box here. Okay, so with respiratory acidosis, just think respiratory, thinking oxygen, CO2. So this is going to be increased CO2, increased carbonic acid. But you're not breathing well with this one. Acidosis, not breathing good. So short of breath, with respiratory alkalosis, opposite of not breathing well is hyperventilation. So excess breathing. You got excessive CO2 coming out. So lots of hydrogen ions in the blood. So symptoms would be dizzy, tingling, things like that. You've heard of how people breathe in a brown bag, but that's just if you've got excess, or you've got excess oxygen coming out. But so here we have CO2 coming out. So excess CO2 being released, which is going to decrease the concentration of your H2CO3. Okay, and then with metabolic, you've got kidneys may fail, excreting hydrogen protons. So when you think metabolic, just think digestive. Alkalosis, you got your diuretic, vomiting, decreased gastric juices. Okay, so looking at this and looking at the next couple slides of notes, it says clinical application. I'm looking at slide 33. Metabolic acidosis, you want to know that increase in CO2, shown here, and not breathing well. So there you go on respiratory acidosis. Make sure you've got that. It says accumulation of non-respiratory acids or loss of base factors that resist shift. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and go back to this one. And you can see that right here. So carbon dioxide levels increase, carbonic acid levels, and that's that H2CO3 increase from acidosis. Okay, next slide, still acidosis. And we discussed all that, just excreting the hydrogen protons. And then alkalosis, remember, means basic. So resist change. You can see kidneys decrease secretions of those hydrogen protons. And then our very last slide, diuretic drugs. And we even wrote that on our T-chart. Antacids, intake, symptoms, decrease in breathing rate, and depth result in concentration of carbon dioxide increasing in the blood. All right, so again, please contact me if you have any questions, and good luck studying. I hope you do good.